Hi, welcome to another episode of Partners in Progress. I'm Joe,
I'm Liz.
and we are both entrepreneurs. We're an entrepreneurial couple. We're married and we own our own business. So we thought, it's not enough to be married to each other as crazy people. We also have 4 kids. We also decided that we wanted to throw running our own business in there
Yeah.
together at the same time. So we're both coaches. I coach leaders in real estate. I do leadership training and I support leaders in that position. And then Liz does something a little bit different. I don't know about that.
Sure. I help moms that have children that have gone through or are going through cancer treatment or leukemia treatment specifically.
Yeah. So we believe in iron sharpens iron. And last week we really kind of opened up the, we opened up our framework of the relationship web. I was really excited about that. I had fun.
Yeah.
And so there's 6 ties to the relationship web. And I really wanted to kind of break it down even more and work on kind of focus on one tie at a time because you can have an overview. You have the what do they say, 30,000 foot overview, but the real magic, the real connection is when you break down each of those. So the first tie, and I know we talked about this already, but there's really not any particular order of importance, but you got to put them in some kind of order, right? So
Right.
so the first one is trust. And it's it's funny because we've always heard that in the culture, right? Trust is a must, right? But it's true. I mean, there's a lot of, they say cliches have a lot of truth, or at least a piece of truth to them, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't stick.
Right.
But the first, I mean, really important part to relationships is trust. So when you think of trust, what do you think
Those trust exercises that I did as a kid.
of? Oh, the ones where you fall
Yeah,
back.
like fall back or like you're rappelling down this mountain. Well, not really a mountain, but
Huh?
as a kid, it seems like a mountain. And you have
Oh,
to
you
trust
mean
the
like the
person.
you mean like the rock climbing walls?
Yeah, but you're
Okay.
rappelling down it. Because you have to
Yeah.
trust the person down below that if you fall, they're going to catch you.
Yeah. So that's what you think of when you think of trust?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I like that. That's actually really good imagery for that. A really good metaphor because I mean, I would say the first piece, we kind of broke it down into six kind of keys for trust, and the first one is vulnerability. Right? You have to be vulnerable in a relationship in order to build trust.
Right.
So what are you doing when you're
You're
rappelling down,
falling. You're
right?
being vulnerable.
You're
Just
yeah,
falling.
you're totally vulnerable. Especially I like how you brought that up because it's like you're throwing yourself back, and whether it's the trust exercise that we did as a kid or the one or rappelling down off of a climbing wall or whatever it is, you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you have to rely on the other person to be there to make sure that you you don't hit the ground in the case of the first one, and you do hit the ground, but not too
Safely.
fast,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think it goes deeper than that because when you think about trust, I mean, you think about vulnerability when you're in a relationship, and this applies. I know I've said this several times, but probably say it 100 more times. But all of these ties apply to all relationships. They're not just marriage, they're not just
Right.
intimate relationships, they're all relationships. That's what we've found over the last, 20 years of really looking at this and then starting to kind of pull it apart and find out what's actually going on here. Um, but when you don't have trust, then every step you take, every step forward is a risk, right?
Yeah.
It's this you're you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And yes.
I was just gonna say, anytime you're talking to somebody and even if it's not like a secret, it's something that you don't feel super comfortable with, but you're sharing it with someone.
Right.
You're putting a lot of trust in that person that they're not going to go, you know, spill all your secrets to somebody else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So you're being vulnerable. But go ahead.
so it's really hard to be friends or like a close friendship with people that like to gossip, because then you're like, well, I know what they're saying about other people to me. So
Mm-hmm.
what are they saying about me to other people?
And I think, yeah, I think there is, that's a really good point, because I think the trust, especially, is one of the ties that is really lacking in a lot of relationships today because of exactly what you're talking about. And especially, and it makes it worse because of social media and and all of that stuff. Because yeah,
Yeah, so you have to be careful even with yourself. Like you have to watch the words that you're like, am I gossiping? Because if you're gossiping to a friend
they're gonna
saying like
betray their
so and
trust.
so did this, and they're gonna start thinking, well, what are they saying about me behind my back? And then your friendship is not gonna be as close.
Right. So that would almost be the opposite. That would be betraying that vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons that trust is probably at an all-time low in relationships right now, is because in order to have that functioning relationship, you have to have their vulnerability. But if you think that someone's going to betray it, if you think that someone's not going to actually trust you, is going to go blab it to whoever, then you can't be vulnerable. There is a risk there.
Right.
So it's important to be vulnerable, but be able, but on the other side, and we'll talk about this in a minute, to be reliable.
Yeah. To be able to for somebody else to be vulnerable with you.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's about my coach. I like the way she says it. My coach says, "I'm in your corner."
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's about being there for the person. It's about having their back, and and holding a space for them to be vulnerable. Right.
Whether that be like saying something dumb
Whether it's
and or doing something dumb, and they're like, okay, yeah, I got
yeah,
your back, I'm gonna help you with that.
yeah, it can apply to all kinds of situations. It can be emotional vulnerability. We've said this word a lot. It can be, it could be financial. It could be whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, look, this is where I'm at. And if you can't get to that point, if you can't get to that point where you're open and just being like, look, this is how it is, then you can't, I think you really can't have a true meaningful connection without that. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Because because humans are a lot smarter than we give ourselves credit for. We can see when someone's holding something back. We can see when we can tell, and it's almost like a sixth sense, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what are they not telling me, right? And we don't know, but it creates
A wall.
this wall,
Yeah.
right? The second piece to kind of ties into that, the second piece of trust is partnership. And it just is, it's like I was saying, it's it's having your back, right? So this is kind of goes from vulnerability into partnership, right? It's someone knowing that someone's going to be there for you, right? Um, that's the essence of what we do as coaches, right?
Right.
We're there to support. We're there as the support. We're there to challenge, and we're there um,
Remind,
remind and
encourage.
encourage.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But ultimately, we want our clients to succeed. I want you to succeed. I want our kids to succeed. We want that,
Right.
right?
And you want your friends to succeed. That's
Exactly.
like one of my coaches was saying, uh, would you talk to a friend the same way you talk to yourself?
Right.
So you kind of have to like think of the ways that you talk to your friends.
Yeah. And are you? Yeah. And do you have their back? Are you
Mm-hmm.
a partner in that relationship, or are you taking more than you're giving?
I'm also like, this is also goes for relationships with yourself,
Sure.
because sometimes you can't even be vulnerable with yourself without yourself getting in the way. It's very weird.
That's true. Well,
But
you have to be able. I think, yeah, I think you have to be vulnerable, but you have to be able to admit the truth.
that's
You
what
have
I
to be
mean.
able
It's
to,
hard to, well, that's what we're talking about. Truth,
right,
vulnerability.
trust. Yeah,
You can't you can't be vulnerable with other people if you're not also vulnerable with yourself. If you can't tell yourself the truth, it's hard for other people to accept when you tell them the truth.
sure. But then, like I said, but sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. But I think on in addition to that, I think sometimes the relationship, whatever that looks like, whether it's you're with your spouse or your team or with your coach, sometimes that relationship can pull the vulnerability out. I mean, it can make you see things that you wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to be honest and vulnerable with yourself, but sometimes that mirror helps you to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's partnership, and then the third piece to that would be consistency. So I think consistency is huge when it comes to trust, because for example, you know, I think consistency really comes down to identity, because in order to truly be consistent with something, I was actually talking to my one of my clients about this morning. Um, and one of the things I was telling her about consistency is, in order to follow through, in order for a habit to become permanent, it has to become part of who you are. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
part of your identity, right? Like um, like just for example, like working out, right? If you want if you want that habit of working out every day to become a true habit, something that you become consistent with, you have to make the shift from I need to work out every day or I have to work out every day to I am the type of person that works out every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? At that point, it becomes part of who you are. At that point, it becomes a non negotiable, right?
Right.
It becomes part of your identity. And you can get to the point where it's so strong that it's like, well, I'm the type of person that breathes. I know,
Yeah.
right? Like it becomes part of you, right? Um, but I think consistency is really important in trust, because when people are always watching you, especially the people that you have relationships with, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what the relationship is, they are always watching you, and they are always um, I hate to use the word judge, but they're always measuring, right? They're always watching what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you're not staying consistent with actions, especially ones that you say that you're going to, then the trust will start to erode. And they go, well, they're not the type of person that stays consistent. They're not the type of person, and eventually that can lead to an integrity crisis, because like, well, he said he was going to do this, but he didn't do it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or he didn't stick to it, right?
Yeah.
And then that really leads into transparency. And this one's pretty self-explanatory, but basically make sure that if you've got any kind of um, if you've got any kind of secrets, then they got to be shared. And I don't mean that you share all your secrets with everyone. That's not what I'm saying. But the in order for you to truly build trust, you have to have transparency in the areas that it matters.
Yeah.
This one obviously is going to vary. So, like with us, we have secrets that obviously no one else is going to know about, nobody needs to know about, and it's not appropriate for anyone to know about, right?
Right.
But, when you're working with
I
your,
wouldn't say secret then.
sure, okay,
Maybe like if you're struggling financially and your friend's like, "Hey, let's go out to eat," and it's like, well, you know that they're wealthier than you are
uh-huh,
and they like to eat at really nice places. You're just gonna be like, "Yeah, I can't come."
okay,
And if they're like, "Oh, why not?" You're not gonna just be like, "Oh, I just can't come." With someone that you're truly close to, you're like, "I just don't have the money for it right now."
I got you. So it's
And
not really a secret. I see what you're saying.
it's just something that maybe you feel a little ashamed about because
So,
I mean, there's secrets that's like That's like best friend type thing.
Yeah.
We share secrets
Yeah.
together, but nobody else gets to know.
Right.
We're in their group.
Well,
But
that's interesting because I was actually talking to, again, one of my clients today, and she was saying that it was really interesting because she was saying that she has been at a point for a while where she doesn't care what people think. Like she's gonna move forward with her business and her life, and she doesn't care what people think, which is a great place to be in a lot of in a lot of situations. But she said that she realized that there's a difference, and we kind of worked through it for a little bit. But she realized that there's a difference between not caring what people think and actually actively sharing her story.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And
You don't need acceptance for your story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And see, I think that's one of the ways that you can have transparency. It's like, look, I'm the first to admit that I was a wreck 2 years ago, right? I was a very unhappy, angry, terrible person. I was a terrible father. I was a terrible husband, terrible business person. It's just, that's who I was. And I'm not saying that to be a victim. I'm saying that to be transparent and to try and build some trust.
Right.
And that has helped. That has already, and I'm not using it as a weapon. I'm using it to try and build trust. And that's already helped me in some of my relationships because it's like, look, this is how I was. I'm not going to try and hide who I was.
Well, and you never know.
But I'm working toward being better.
You never know who needs to hear your story.
Exactly.
And, there's going to be people out there that criticize you for your story.
Yeah.
Or not understand your story. And you don't really need to explain it to them or justify it to them either.
Right.
Like people that aren't in your corner.
Yeah. And transparency doesn't necessarily mean you tell everyone everything.
Yeah, just, don't air out the dirty laundry or anything like that, whatever.
Right. But don't hold back the facts that matter, right. I guess.
Use discernment.
Well, for a while, we've talked about this quite a few times on the podcast, but for a while, for the longest time, only our closest friends even knew about what was going on with our son, with him going through cancer.
Yeah.
Because, and I actually shared with my client this morning that I said, for the longest time, I wouldn't even let my family leave the house with what I called their victim shirts on. The things that said, mom of a warrior or whatever. And then I realized that it was like, at that point, my pride's getting in the way. At that point, I'm not being transparent. I'm trying to hide a piece of my story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We were so prideful that we didn't want to be victims. Right. That we were hiding it. And it's like, well.
And it almost had the reverse effect. Yeah. Right? We didn't want to be victims because I was too prideful about being a victim. It's like, but like you said, maybe there's someone that needs to hear the story and would be inspired by the story.
Person out there shopping and their son just got diagnosed, or daughter just got diagnosed, and maybe they need to talk to someone, but we were hiding. I don't know if it was because of us wanting to not become victims, but maybe we didn't want to talk about it. Maybe it was deeper than that. I don't know. Yeah. It was pride either way.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And definitely a lack of transparency. Mm-hmm. Now, again, there's a fine line. You don't want to just go telling everyone your story all the time, because first of all, not everyone wants to hear it.
No.
Second of all, you don't want to just cram it down people's throats. But when it's appropriate, transparency is key.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the fifth thing is reliability. So this one is, I keep saying this is huge. These are all really important components within trust, and they all work together.
Yeah.
But reliability, I guess reliability is one of the ones that I've been, not personally, I don't think I've been personally struggling with this. I've been struggling with this in some relationships. I'll just put it that way. Reliability is when, like, we all know that guy, or the girl or gal or
Person.
person, you know, we know that
Human
person
soul.
where they say they're going to do something, right? They're going to show up to the meeting, or they're going to help you do something or whatever. And then they always come up with some kind of excuse that, oh, it didn't work out or something came up, right? And, you know, we know some people like that it's just like every single stinking time that they say that they're going to show up, something comes up.
Yeah.
And that, I hate to say it, but it erodes trust. It makes it to the point where they're not reliable anymore. And you don't want to call on them. You don't want to help. You don't want them to help you. You don't reach out to them.
No.
And it's not even a matter of like resentment. It's just a matter of like, I'm not even going to bother because they're not going to show up. You know, I tell my coaching clients sometimes that I call unreliability the silent killer of relationships. Because what happens is most of the time, you can tell me if this is true for you, but most of the time when someone's unreliable, most people aren't going to say anything. They're not going to be like, dude, come on, you never show up when I tell you to, you say you're going to. They just be like, over time it starts to erode, and over time it's like, you know, I'm just not going to say anything because he never shows up when he says he's gonna, and it just starts to erode this trust silently. And then you wake up 5 years later and you don't even have a relationship. The trust is totally gone because one thing, you know, it's one little thing after another.
Compounding.
So reliability is huge. You show up when you say you're gonna show up. And
if you're gonna be late, text
say
them and
that you're gonna be late. Yeah. And I deal with this with real estate professionals all the time. Like, be reliable. That's actually one of the biggest things that I heard on the other side of the transaction when I used to do home inspections all the time, is there would be people that would complain about their agent always being late. And you could see that it was starting to erode trust.
And you definitely want your clients who's buying a house from you trust you.
You want them to trust you.
Because they're less likely to call you when the water heater breaks and say this is your fault because they trust you.
Yeah, right. Saying. Know you, like you, trust you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So reliability is one of the biggest pieces of trust. Yeah. You do what you say you're going to do. And then the last piece, and this one almost sounds counterintuitive. And whenever I teach this, people are like, what? But the last piece of trust is actually boundaries. Because, and I want to clarify, I don't mean walls. There's a difference between boundaries and walls. Basically, a wall is something that I put up between you and me. Meaning I don't want you to get in, right?
Right.
A boundary is something that keeps the relationship safe. And basically what that is you decide whatever it is in a situation, you decide I'm only going to allow this, or I'm not going to allow this, right? In the relationship. Like, you know, just, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's like, you know, one of those friends that just show up at your door without calling.
Sure. That's a perfect example of a boundary. Yeah.
I need a little notice.
My parents, when I was growing up, which is kind of ironic because I grew up on a ranch, but my parents used to say when I was growing up that tall fences make good neighbors. Because you want to have your space, you want to have your boundaries, right? You know, and I'm not going to go beyond that point. So the things to remember when it comes to boundaries is be clear on those, right? Yeah. Be clear that, you know, like, for example, you know, when I'm working from home, it's like I'm got this amount of time that I'm going to work from home, and nobody's going to bother me when I'm working at home. And so I've set the boundary. You respect the boundary. I get the work done. We're all happy, right? But if that boundary is pushed and I got to keep coming out and taking care of things constantly, I'm never going to get anything done. Right. And we can't move our business forward. We can't move our family forward, right? So that's just an example of a boundary. The other thing is obviously make sure that you're respecting the other people's boundaries.
Right? And you can tell if somebody is uncomfortable
Sure you can.
because I have this friend
Okay.
and she doesn't understand boundaries when it comes to personal space because she will just like, hi, how's it going? Like right in your face. And it's like, so if they look at you and they're freaking out, their eyes are all big, maybe you should just
Maybe you're not giving them the signal
what I think
hard
is
enough or
so
something.
funny. She's such a sweet lady, but I can see it in other people's eyes when they're having conversations with her and she's just like in their bubble and they're just like, but she has no concept, no idea.
Well, it just might be an awareness piece.
But it's just funny. But you can tell, I'm just saying, you
Yeah,
can tell when
sure.
people's boundaries are being pushed because they'll either get like annoyed, they'll go silent, they will give you signs.
Yeah.
So just, awareness on that.
And I think what it does if you push the boundaries too much, if you start to overwhelm those boundaries, then what it does is it pulls back that
Trust.
it pulls back that desire to be vulnerable, because it's like you're way overstepping your boundaries right now. I don't want to be vulnerable with you. I don't
Right.
want to trust you. And that makes it to where you don't feel like there's a partnership, you don't feel like there's a reliability. It's this whole cycle, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's funny because I've talked to a couple of my clients about the boundaries, and they look at me like, how is boundaries part of trust? But it's like part of trusting. It's part of respecting that space, right? Holding that space for someone else. And if you're not being consciously aware of that, then you start to step into that, and it starts to shake the system.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So that's first tie. That's trust. Anything to add to that?
No. I think pretty solid. I trust it's solid.
So trust is really important for the relationship web. Next session we'll be talking about love and how that's important in every relationship. It's not just in your intimate relationship. It's important in all relationships, because that's about going beyond yourself. But we won't get too much into that today. But trust, it's true what they say. Trust is a must, right? So with that, thanks for being here, and
thank you.
we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.